Welcome back to the Super Hero Shonen Punch podcast. Almost forgot the name of the title.
It's called Super Hero Shonen Punch. We're back.
You can't stop us. Who watches the Shonen Punchers? I asked
Ben.
you. That's true.
And I think that's it. But
Yes.
we're happy to have you here.
We're happy to have you here. Have your worries relieved that Ben is there to take us out if we ever become too powerful. So.
And he could, at least me.
It's true.
Yeah.
Put some Nutella in the mix. He can take me out too.
I always almost forget about that. Nobody else gets to know, but it's a funny story.
It's true.
So the holidays happened.
Uh-huh.
They're great. It was good.
I got this sick mic that just picked up my sipping of coffee. You probably heard that wonderful gurgle.
Can you give me that gurgle again? Just one more time. I didn't hear it at all. But I'm sure it would sound great if I could hear it.
It's some good old-fashioned, what's it called? Costco pre-ground coffee, baby.
Commonly called Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be confused with any of your friends that are also named Joe.
It's true. And
I had 3 cups of coffee this morning, so I'm wired. I'm ready to go, baby.
I'm finishing my first, and then I came prepared with my second.
I love that. That's perfect for you.
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Well, if you're ready to go, I'm ready to dive in.
Let's do it.
We read Watchmen. This is probably like my 10th read of Watchmen.
Really?
I think I've read Watchmen more than any other graphic novel. Love it. One of my favorites, if not my favorite. I don't think it is my favorite, but it's one of my favorites. It's like, it's up there. But if I remember correctly, this is the first time you have ever read Watchmen, right?
Yes. I forget what year the movie came out, but I saw the movie and it was interesting and I was fun. Like, definitely different than any of the other superhero movies that came out at the time, which like kind of echoes this comic for like when it came out, I guess you could say, like changing things up. Yeah, it was, I could see how you've read it that many times. Like, there's so much in it that I feel like I either missed or need to chew on again to see like how it relates. Just even like the pacing of which, like switching between characters, kind of going not back in time, but like I'm gonna adjust myself again. There we go. Not going back in time, but like seeing things from somebody else's perspective, going through some of the same events and stuff like that. But it's just kind of a head explosion from the beginning.
Yeah. They really just throw you right into the thick of it with with some driving plot hooks that'll be throughout the entire story. They just, I mean, page 2. Just like, you're in it. Here you go. It's going to be a crazy ride.
I guess, Can we do a little spoiler-free, like, plot setting?
Yes. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. I'll start, and you may have to come in to do it justice.
No worries.
You're watching this Shonen Puncher. It's like it's set in the 60s.
Yep. Set in the 60s. It's like alternative history sort of deal.
Yes. Basically, instead of like the normal history in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, like 40s, 50s, superheroes come on the scene and start cleaning up crime and beating up the bad guys, kind of like your golden age comics. Like, I would say like that, right? Like, it kind of feels like those superheroes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's supposed to reflect those like golden age, silver age superhero archetypes.
Very clean cut, very, hey, Jim, why didn't you come down to the speakeasy? Not speakeasy. I don't know. That fell flat.
I liked it. But no, the heroes are that like classic, iconic, clean cut. We solve the crimes.
No-
See you next time, Sheriff.
Jaywalkers. Never
Exactly.
come here again.
Yeah, or we'll throw you in jail again,
That's
you
right.
egghead.
So very, very, like, over the top, like, good triumphs over evil all the time. Evil only needs a punch to the chin to either be vanquished or reformed. But that's not where our story starts. Our story starts in, like, the late 60s, and the world's kind of gone to crap. Right.
Yeah, I think it's so the story jumps around a lot. So, yeah, as far as timeline, it's gonna go from like the 40s, 50s through like the 60s, 70s, 80s, because there's like these different timeline stuff going on. But yeah, we pick up somewhere in there where the war it's dark, it's brooding,
And there's been a murder.
There's been a murder. One of these classic heroes has been murdered. The comedian. And this is, I will highlight the movie here. That was like the best scene in the entire movie. Is the opening scene where the comedian gets murdered. It's great. It's like so perfect to match the vibe of the comic. But yeah, so the comedian gets murdered, and it's basically the mystery of what's behind this that the comic proposes to unravel. It's like we're going to investigate and learn why the comedian was murdered, and the people investigating it. You have Rorschach, who is this anti-hero hero, who now is like that's turned into its own superhero archetype, but at this point in time, that was not like a common archetype in superheroes. Yeah, so Rorschach is basically like, what's going on? I'm going to figure out. There's something going on behind the scenes. And he gets the whole gang together. And it's like, let's go solve this problem. Let's figure out what's going on.
And he seems put together. Like, he feels like a classic, like, film noir dragnet dude. Like, I'm walking my beat. The world is crappy, but I'm one of the only forms of justice left, and somebody's trying to kill superheroes. So he, like you said, goes to the different heroes who I think at this point you start to see most of them are out of the heroing business. There's been like a law put in place, right? That you can't be doing vigilante heroism unless it's like, I mean, unless it's government sanctioned, so it's not vigilante. And through like Rorschach's eyes, you see these different people who are either, some of them still working on it, or some of them have kind of moved on in their lives. But he like goes around and warns these people, and yeah, there's someone killing heroes, and they're like, oh, Rorschach, you're just like, that guy was a jerk. No one liked him. He probably had plenty of enemies. But yeah, it's so interesting from looking back at the start with how much they peel back about who Rorschach is later. It's like, that's cool.
It is. The character development of Rorschach is super exciting and fun. I think without the way they did Rorschach, that Watchmen wouldn't have landed. Because like, especially with Rorschach, so one of the predominant themes throughout the book is like, who defines morality? And I know it's just a comic book, but that's really like the driving question that they're asking through a lot of this book is, who defines morality? Why is it defined the way it is? Is it cultural? Is it personal? And what happens with, let's say, superheroes, for example? Because the whole the whole book just kind of peels back the archetype of superheroes and takes a different perspective, a different look at it. And it's Rorschach saying, well, if they're sanctioned by the government, what are they agreeing to do? If they're not sanctioned by the government, what standards should they be held to? And it's like asking all these interesting questions. They're a lot of fun. But that's like a driving beat, and Rorschach is the character that pushes that point to the end. And then we have this crazy finale that we'll get into in the spoiler part. But Rorschach, I think, is the driving force. And I mean, it's like the character of Watchmen is, you got Rorschach is the one I think that most people find incredibly compelling. There's Night Owl as well that's very compelling. There's Silk Scepter, who are also very compelling, but I think Rorschach is the one who you're like, I want to see what happens with this guy. I'm interested in the arc and what's happening in his world, in his life, and where he came from. Is so interesting to then see what he turns into, what he does.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say, first impressions, as I was getting into it, it felt like it was one that I was going to read once and be done with, because it's so intense.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't pull any punches. But I don't know, like the more you get into it and see the questions it is raising, there's a lot to chew on. And I don't know, it's not just that dark and gritty for no reason, even though the whole series is pretty nihilistic, it feels like. Nihilistic irony throughout almost the whole thing. But yeah, I do think I may go back to it. It'll be a little while, but I don't think I dove into as much of like I guess getting into some of the artwork and like the decisions. It's cool. Like in between the comics, there's the guy made like, what do you call it, like set pieces almost, it feels like, of like documents that you can read or newspaper headlines that flesh things out.
Yep.
I don't think I dove into those as much as I could, because there's a lot there. But yeah, it feels like one, like you going back to it 8 to 10 times, I think there's plenty there, like after a break, to just dive back in and see more connections that you didn't see before. I don't know.
Yep.
It's cool.
Yeah. And it's fun. I did the whole superhero comic thing for so long that it's really fun to fall into, all these superhero comics and their storylines, and just be caught up with them, and then take a break and go to Watchmen, because it's usually such stark contrast. But then also the influence of Watchmen on modern day comics is massive. I mean, this comic has, in a lot of ways, redefined what comics thought they could do. Like, an easy example, just in how Dave Gibbons illustrated and laid out the comic, right? So we have 9 grid panels. That is like Watchmen's influence on comic. The 3-3-3 playing out across 2 pages. That's Dave Gibbons flexing what he could do. Where there's a still shot, right? And in one panel, somebody walks in. Next panel, exact same still frame that is illustrated, but the person's moved a little further, right? Giving you that motion in comics. The color work. John Higgins is the colorist for this. Color in comics is, I think, oftentimes used very successfully to like manipulate toward emotions and feelings. And then in this, I mean, and you're right, you're describing this gritty, nihilistic, dark, brooding comic. They used pink and neon colors. Like every other page, you turn the page and it's like this bright neon color that doesn't seem to fit. And they don't do that well in a lot of comics. Like there's a comic came out, Witches. Really cool story idea. It's about witches in the woods. It's fun. But the color work, man, they couldn't do what Watchmen did in that way. They couldn't have neon colors in that. The American Gods comic books, they have vibrant colors, but they couldn't do what Watchmen did. But people want to, right? It's clearly like the influence is Watchmen, where they're like, we want the dark brooding tone, or we want the happy vibrant tone. But how do you still keep that tone without just leaning on the art? And it's the combination of Alan Moore's writing, David Gibbons' pencil work and illustrations, inking, and then John Higgins' color work. That combination is so powerful. They did like such a good job.
Small confession. The version I read was in black and white.
What?
There's we can time this out because I can just not talk about that.
No, this is staying in. You have to leave this in.
Because
Oh man. So were you reading like an artist edition or like a noir edition or something?
I don't know. Like, I mean, I can. Well.
Oh no.
I got a bit of a different take on this.
Wait, so do you looking at that now, you can just like scroll.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the color work?
Oh yeah. I mean, seeing what they were actually trying to do, it's really cool. Like you said, like it's almost garish in some ways, but doesn't cross that line. I don't know. It's really cool.
It is.
Now I need to read it again sooner than later.
You can just look at you can look through, see some of it is just powerful stuff. And people have tried to make that happen again and again and again in comics. In Watchmen, they did it best. They did it first, they did it best. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could say that even without the color, the story holds up.
The story does hold up.
But it does seem like it adds a lot, like even just looking through that cursory. It's funny, though.
I do want to ask a question for you about the art, because I think Watchmen, it does a great job of building a world, not just in the story that it's telling and the context that it gives you of the history of not just the world but the characters especially. But I think it also does a crazy good job of building the world in the artwork. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, so even before the artwork, just they go through different like we were saying, they do different people's perspectives. One of the ones that I felt was kind of cool is, so they go through the different superheroes. You see like backstory, you kind of see how their life has played out up until that point, but they also check in with this local newspaper stand guy, and he's discussing the current events. And oddly enough, while there's a kid next to him reading like a random pirate narrative, like comic book, but you see like what is happening in the world through their eyes, and like what that city is like, because there's like graffiti and different things, and it just paints more toward what's happening in the world. You don't just see it through like the hero's eyes, like when they walk into the bar and like rough up some bad guys for information. Like you actually see what the normal people see, or like what some of those bad guys may be interacting with. But on the art end, he does a really good job at making, I don't know, like you see how gritty the city is. I don't know. How better to say it, but like there's a lot of weight, like I guess being that it was black and white in my read through, but really heavy line weight at times.
Mm-hmm.
There's shadows and I don't know how to, like, yeah, I don't know how to say that well, but like, does that follow what you're thinking? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially when you were talking about the city,
mm-hmm.
like there's such an emphasis on exploring beyond the focal point. Um, you can't open Watchmen and look at a panel without also being able to say, "Oh, look at that thing in the background. Oh, look at how he drew that back there." I mean, there's a segment of Watchmen where one of the characters he's on Mars and he's got a photo of him with someone else, and he like drops that photo or walks away from the photo. I don't remember exactly how it plays out. And there's a series of panels where you watch the picture is. Oh, hi, Kyle.
Oh, hello.
Hi, baby. The picture gets farther and farther away. Or is it closer and closer? I don't remember which way it goes. But his ability to do out of focus details or out of focus things that will be important to the story or are just important to the context of the world that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when Rorschach visits Night Owl in his home, goes to his home, you can see the things that Night Owl has in his house. You can see that he likes books and reads books. You can see the style of his house, like what his household looks like. And that is just not something that people, especially now in comics, do. That it was just so much farther than what needed to happen. And that built the world for me. I was like, I can live in this because every time I go back to it, there's so much more for me to just immerse myself in. It is very immersive artwork. I think that's, yeah. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to shut the door.
Okay.
And Dave, you're going to have to clip this out or blur or something because I don't have any pants on.
Oh, no.
So I'll be back.
Triple zoom.
Hey!
Triple zoom.
Triple zoom. 4x, 5x zoom.
That's right. I'd like to say,
How funny would it have been if I stood up and I didn't have underwear on and you see my ass go over there?
that's our Patreon, our highest
There we
tier.
go.
I will say, in solidarity for I don't think I'm ruining anything, but genetically engineered super monsters, I wore this today in solidarity.
Nice. Love it.
Because some were harmed in the making of this comic book. And
Absolutely they were.
And I won't stand for it.
I will. No, I won't.
We're done.
I didn't agree with it. But it was a great story beat. So Watchmen, I would say the more you read comics, especially like classic superhero comics, the more fun Watchmen can be to go back and revisit. Because it does take a look at comics.
Yes, and I could see how fresh this would be, like just even in a little bit of like skimming I've done of some old ones where it's fun, but the old ones are very much like, oh, the Green Lantern, not the Green Lantern, the Green Goblin, he's attacking the city with grenades, and then they just go up and punch him, and I mean there's more to it usually, but it's usually just that level in a lot of ways, and with it developing and what like it was, a lot of them were for kids, I would say back then, and I don't know, I get where comics started and the time, like in the 50s, people just wanting things to be right and wrong, and like
Yep.
needing stuff like that to attach to. And then I can see, this came out in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
I can see things transitioning both in like our world and then wanting to transition that in this medium. Like how cool it would have been to see that happen.
Yeah.
So I need to get like an auto setting.
Yeah, you do.
We need more subscribers so I can.
I think you hit the nail on the head, especially with like your example of the Green Goblin's throwing grenades, let's go punch him in the face. Like comic books had been very good guy versus bad guy. That's what they evolved into. Which ironically, when the Batman comics started, they were much darker than Batman comics started fairly dark for comic books at the time when they first started coming out. And then they got lighter and lighter and lighter, more kid-friendly. And now it's this weird mix where there's a lot of really, really dark, brooding, ooh, that's Batman. And then really kid-friendly, Batman adventure. It's interesting seeing how that's gone. But when Watchmen came out, the trend of comics was, hey, good guys are good, bad guys are bad. Good guys punch bad guys in the mouth. And that was also, I mean, clearly the book is trying to make us also reflect on history, and giving us this alternative history that they have. They're clearly trying to also imply things there, right? I'm not going to draw all the conclusions because mine may be incorrect to how some people would interpret that, right? But I think it is really interesting looking at the context of like, what I see as, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys in the comics. Like, no. Like, look at how gray this all is. Look at how even the bad guys in the comic, like, they have this weird motive that's maybe good ? And maybe the guy that's good does something that you go, that was like disturbingly bad. And I think the best portrayal of that in the entire comic is the comedian. Like, he's the one who they go, look at the bad things he's done. Not only now look at how his death is bringing these good questions, these good things to pursue and ask and whatever. But also, major spoiler. The comedian, we know, committed acts of sexual assault. And we know also is the father of one of our main characters. She's left, like, reeling and wrestling from that. Like, how this is a good person. We don't know all of the circumstances that she came from, right? But there's clearly implied questions around, like, what was that? And her mom is basically like, it's complicated. Like, there were bad things, there were good things, it's complicated. And that's such a challenging point to make in comics, where comics up until that point didn't allow gray room like that. They didn't allow space to go, it's complicated. The good guy does bad things, and the bad guy might have good motives. This one is like very clearly, it's gray.
Yeah. Yes, it doesn't try to tackle the answer of like what is right and wrong. It's people are people. No one's perfect. I mean, like it's not a no one's perfect, we're all okay type of thing. It's don't both over romanticize, but don't put people on a pedestal and expect them to like always fulfill that, or don't always trust that they're going to, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, the comic very much, okay, what a timeless story. Because I read this and Ozymandias, I go, who's like the modern day Ozymandias that has like infinite wealth and power and could like, I go, there are people that are alive now that I go, they feel like they could be Ozymandias, right? That's so crazy to me. that this is 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we're thinking of specific people. This is like they're making statements on the current culture. And it's still a story that's interesting to use to like look through at our culture and the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Okay.
Is it spoiler time?
I think so. Here, let me look at my notes real quick. See if there's anything I missed as far as things I want to. Okay. No, I think I'm ready for spoilers.
Cool. Because I think it'll be fun to talk through basically each character.
I do like that.
So, I know that that pirate novel, the pirate comic, is supposed to kind of, kind of mirror some of what's happening, and like both in like the very specific thing, but like also what the heroes are going through, and they're trying to figure out. Explain, because I don't think I dove into it enough to really get what they were trying to do with it, but it was such a cool tangent during all of that.
Okay, so the pirate storyline.
Yes.
I'm going to start by saying I think it's like the weakest part of Watchmen.
I think that's fair.
It's not my favorite. It summarizes parts of Watchmen, but in a different context and at a different speed. So basically, and I had to look at the summary for this because I brush over it now. I don't
How
always
dare you
read that. I know. Dude's family is killed by pirates, and then he's stranded on an island, and he's willing to do anything to stop the pirates from killing his family.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the do the ends justify the means? Or is it the utility of my actions? It's like that question in this story too. But I think it's just a retelling of parts of the story in a different context. That's what I see that as.
I think that covers it. And it's interesting just as flavor in between what you're doing, but it can be kind of jarring where you're into the story and everything, and then it's like, are pirates? Mm-hmm. But we're into spoilers now. For those,
we are into spoilers.
Who do we talk about first? Who do you want to talk about?
I mean, the low hanging fruit is Dr. Manhattan and Rorschach, followed by Ozymandias. Those are the easiest ones, I think, to talk about.
Maybe we get the little bit more tertiary people out of the way then.
Yeah, okay. Okay, lay me up. Who you got?
So Mr. Owlbat, man.
Yes, Night Owl.
Night Owl.
Yeah.
He's a genius, but maybe a lesser genius than the other geniuses in this story. Mechanical whiz.
Yep.
He took over after one of the other Night Owl retired.
Yep. Yeah.
And seemed to be one of the few mainstays still fighting crime for a while with Rorschach. Mm-hmm. Rorschach. But like, seems to be later middle-aged, getting his beer belly and all that stuff.
Yep.
And living like comfortably, maybe for now. He's rich.
He seems fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sorry. He's my favorite in terms of like the questions about superheroes, even more so than Rorschach, because basically he's like, no, I'm in retirement, Rorschach, this is nonsense, go away, kinda, but actually maybe let's talk.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn really quickly that he's very, I do the right thing for the right reason sort of guy. And then quickly you learn, like, oh, he misses the excitement
Mm-hmm.
of being a hero,
Yeah.
to the point where they lean into that so hard. Like, he's here for the thrill, he's here
Mm-hmm.
for the excitement, to the point where he cannot find arousal until he is back fighting crime. And
Yep.
they have this absolutely absurdist scene where he and another superhero, who I'm sure we'll talk about shortly, do some crime fighting. They do some crime fighting and then get down, dirty, sweaty, nasty in the sheets of a plane, an aeroplane that has an owl face on it. And he's back at it, boys.
And
He's on the horse again, if you know what I mean.
mm-hmm.
And they do some quite interesting abstract visual storytelling.
There's a flamethrower on the front.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think
funny, yeah.
he's a very conflicted character, but as the reader, they make it pretty abundantly clear that his motives are, while he may say and think to himself that his motives are pure and good, there's also those interesting behind the scenes motives of, like, he is in reality, like, a big part of it is the thrill, is doing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a fun question to ask about superheroes.
It was interesting too. I knew that he was Batman type of archetype. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he seems to be using gadgets and things to fight crime
Yep.
and stuff. But I don't think I realized till toward the end that the only person with actual super powers is Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that just even makes it more interesting, because it's just these people that are either very smart but, like, trained hard, and they do only punch.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was interesting later on, like, because they don't focus a lot on the powers for the most part anyway. Like, if they don't, that's not the story. But
Yep.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah, and I don't know if I saw quite. Yeah, I like. I'm gonna say Mr. Owl. Is it Owlman? I need the characters.
Night Owl.
Night Owl. Sorry.
I like Owlman more. So
Owlman. Mr. Owl. How many licks?
Crunch.
Yes. But kind of him getting dragged back in because he misses it is funny and cool, and I don't think I quite picked up on that way. Yeah.
Okay, who you got next?
Let's see here. I'm second guessing and thinking we need to, like, go through the story first now, but we're already started.
I mean, people can read it. Go read it.
That's
if
right.
you we can do some summaries, but go read it.
This is our takes.
It's worth it.
Yes, you have Sally Jupiter. That's the right. Yeah.
It's the mom, right?
The mom, and then Lori Jupiter is the daughter.
Yep.
So Lori Jupiter, interesting character. She's the daughter of a superhero, and very quickly you realize that she didn't mind the superheroing, but feels like it was forced on her, because her mom just kind of was like, "Go train, go lift, and go fight crime," because I loved it, and I think she questions that through the whole time. She has a relationship with the Atomic Man, Dr. Manhattan. It was interesting that they view Dr. Manhattan as basically a, like, walking nuke, just because he can do basically anything. And she is, like, the only thing keeping him in check. So, like, they pay her basically just to be with him?
Yeah,
more or less.
Don't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But an interesting character, because she's, like you said earlier, she finds out through the story that her mom's attempted rapist ends up being her dad, and fighting and dealing with that and figuring that out. Um, I it's hard to not talk about like Dr. Manhattan's story with her, because
Yeah, it's very entangled.
but
So one interesting thing back to Night Owl is how Night Owl he pursued the role of Night Owl to inherit it, sort of deal. He took the mantle. He looked up to superheroes, yada yada. He came in because he wanted to, and then we have someone else here who was brought into it, not forced, but implied that her mother was basically like, you need to do this just like I did, sort of deal, like you were mentioning. I just think it's interesting that they ended up finding a relationship. They ended up having a relationship, and that's a big part of the story as well. But it's interesting how each of them came into the world of superheroes, and then how each of them look at other superheroes and their response to other superheroes. Even though they're pretty similar in a lot of ways. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yep.
We have to come back to her with Dr. Manhattan, because there's some big old beats there.
Big old beats.
Big old beats. But yeah, I think through her and her mom, it was a kind of cool, like this whole comic does a lot of like we said, looking back at like the old comic books, and not, I don't know if like critiquing, but like trying to pull them down to a human level.
Yep.
And that was cool, looking through like the flashbacks to her mom's life, where you see like these people that are supposed to be that like high level, super good, like always busting evil, but you start to see the cracks and see things underneath, where like the attempted like sexual assault, like those types of things, seeing like the relationships between those superheroes falling apart some, and like the comedian kind of throwing a wrench in it, just saying like, you guys are getting focused on these things, but the world just sucks. Like, I don't know.
Yep.
That was a really interesting part of the whole story to me, was just kind of that slow refocusing, I guess. Yeah.
I do agree.
I think I should have taken notes to keep my brain more in line here.
You're good. I think that made sense too. I like that.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. There's a big shift, but it all, yeah. Okay. Who else you got, Dave?
Who do I got? Hooded Justice. No.
Huh? Okay, so actually, now that you mention it, Dave, did you see there was a series called Before Watchmen?
I didn't look closely, but I saw that there was prequels and sequels, possibly.
Yep. Yeah.
I have not.
So Before Watchmen goes into the early Watchmen.
Cool.
That we are introduced to and learn some about, and it's stories about them before, and Rorschach and some others, but primarily it's the OG group that is in Watchmen, and kind of paints more of a picture for them.
Is it as dark?
It was, yes,
yeah,
it's very dark.
Oh,
it was very disappointing.
Oh, that stinks.
Incredibly disappointing, because also a big part of the a big perk of Watchmen that they do well is being ambiguous about some characters. and their backgrounds and what really happened and why they're the way they are. And this was kind of just like before Watchmen kind of tried to explain a lot of things that didn't help more than their specific siloed story. So the story for some of those characters was really fun in the before Watchmen, but it wasn't fun to carry into Watchmen. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's disappointing, though.
Yeah, it was. I have them all.
Yeah.
I bought every issue. They came out. I read them all. And I went, I didn't like that.
Aw.
And then I bought the first 3 issues of the follow-up series, Doomsday Clock. And I stopped buying it. Because I was like, I already made this mistake. This is not fun. This is garbage, I said.
Is it the same author and everything?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Alan Moore, who wrote Watchmen, there were legal issues after he wrote Watchmen with DC that he had. So already sour taste in his mouth, yada yada. Alan Moore is very, I wrote something with a beginning, middle, end. Don't touch it. Don't do anything. Like, he didn't help with the movies. He doesn't do any prequel, sequel stuff. He is like, I did it. It's done. The artist, though, Dave Gibbons, for Watchmen, he has helped with or commented on other things at least. So, like, the Doomsday Clock story, he at least was like, hey, I hope it does well. I know their vision is to honor what we did, so that's sick. And he was pretty cool with it. Alan Moore is very like, if you touch my stuff, we're not cool. So he it's a bummer because Jim Lee was over DC Publishing, and Jim Lee, I'm sure, would have wanted Alan Moore on the project to consult or help in any ways. And it's like, man, it's hard to see Alan Moore angry about things, and he's like, oh, they're ruining my work, sort of deal. When it's like, well, then help him.
Yeah.
Clearly, everybody is like, Alan Moore wrote this really crazy cool thing. The DC wants Alan Moore. Help him. Be like, okay, here's what I do not want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. Help him.
Especially that it's not like a self-published thing or something.
Yeah.
Because I get his perspective, but it was published under the, like, they own it, or however that works. They have the right to keep going. So, like you said, yeah, like, help make it better. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or, and I mean, it sucks, but like, or you get a contract at the start that says you can't do anything else with these works. Yeah. But that's one of the crazy things. Okay, so here's another history piece about Watchmen. The heroes that are in it, they did not start with Watchmen. DC Comics bought the licensing and the rights from Charlotte. I think it's Charlotte. It's Charlotte or something like that. Comics. It's an old publisher. And they actually went out of business after this all happened. They closed their doors. But the heroes that you see in Watchmen, a decent number of them, they were created by this other comic publisher. And then they were bought specifically for use in other areas, and they were used in Watchmen. So it's even this like kick in the gut to the people that created those heroes. Very purposeful, very intentional. Like, this was in my opinion, it was a fairly mean-spirited thing to do. They bought the rights to these comics, or to these superheroes, and then went, look, we're going to critique superheroes with the ones that you created. Very interesting, but that's also where it's kind of, it's like, maybe have more, I don't know. Alan Moore's response, I'm not a huge fan of how he's responded to how things have been done. Even if I'm not a fan of them, like, I will complain about the Watchmen movies. I will complain about Schneider. I will fight him. but I still, I'm like, Alan Moore, you gotta chill, dude. You gotta chill, dog.
Yeah, it's a little
much.
hypocritical.
Yeah,
You
especially after you bought someone else's work
and then
that they put a lot of effort into, and you did it. Well, he didn't specifically buy it, but then the use that you had for it was to dunk on those people and their work. Is kind of like, come on, you can't complain about other people using your work.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Comic politics.
Comic politics. Oh, there's so much. Okay, who we got, Dave?
Who we got?
I'm ready.
The comedian. La Comedienne.
La Comedian.
You've got the guy. I think they portray him where they try to say he's got one of the best views of the world, because there's a lot of superheroes toward the end that look back and they're like, he was a dirtbag, but he knew what was going on, or something like that. And I do have to say it's interesting that the comedian who, like, they showed that he goes to Vietnam. He's not a good guy. Like, he has a kid with someone from there and then just leaves her. I think he also, doesn't he kill her?
He killed a ton. I don't remember if he killed her specifically, but the main thing that stands out to me is when he's using the flamethrower and he's laughing while he's lighting people on fire, and it's like disturbing. It's a very uncomfortable panel and portrayal that they gave of the comedian there.
Yes. Yeah. And also, like, our vehicle for seeing, like, how even the golden age of superheroes had really bad parts to it, or really bad. There's bad people through the whole thing. That and he's the catalyst for, like, the murder. Like, he's the murderer in the beginning that starts the ball rolling into the whole story. And you find out that he is the one that kind of unraveled what was happening. Like, he investigated what the billionaire guy was trying to do, and I don't know what he wrestles, because you see him throughout the story then that he, like, gets drunk and is, like, not sure what to do about what he knows and doesn't feel like he can stop it. I can't tell if he's worried about the end of war and, like, things getting better, or if he's actually worried about, like, the loss of life and things that it's going to take to get there.
Ooh, that's a really interesting take, Dave.
Because they talk about some of that, and they say, like, the comedian was on to me, I had to take him out. Ironic that the guy who did all this stuff was, like, thrown for a loop by this, but they talk about it being like he saw that like it's the billionaire guy pontificating the whole thing at the end, and so like I don't know if he gets that right of, like, what the comedian was thinking, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I had not thought of it like that. Man, I guess I got to read it again. No, I had. I like that. Yeah, I had always read it as, this guy who we go, he is not a good guy. He does evil things. He still has something leading his compass. But I also really like the interpretation of, like, this whole idea of unity and a common enemy that is untangible, of peace potentially being something that would make him distraught, because that's his life, is war, is violence,
and is always escalated. It's gone from fighting petty crime to fighting these large wars to, I think, his cynicism. I think he thought World War III was coming and he was ready for it, type of thing.
Yeah, clear. Yeah, I do agree. He definitely thought World War III was coming. I think most people did, but I think he, like you said, he was almost like, let's go then. Mm-hmm. That's the vibe I would think too, is that he's saying, okay, I'll be back at it finally, mm-hmm. in that thing. But yeah, it is interesting. You know, that's the character that wouldn't shut up. That's the one that was going to ruin the plan. So he's the one they had to kill first.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which, there's a plot point about not shutting up and who spills the beans. Mm-hmm. And we should get to that too at some point, because that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I guess just a quick thing, because it paints into that. Like, so a hero's been murdered. You track it with the different characters, trying to unravel what's going on. You look through Rorschach's lens, where he's the one that's like, there's a conspiracy. And like toward the end, you find out there was a conspiracy. It's not some shadow agency. It's another hero. And he has a plan to unite the world by like staging a mass attack with an alien being that he created, and basically pushing the dominoes over to like bring about world peace. And yeah, so it's just I think that paints a little bit more of like what these characters, like where they're heading and why they're doing what they're doing.
So the comedian knew, this guy is going to unleash hell on Earth somehow, and it will, tons and tons of innocent people will die. Only it's fake. Like, he knows, like, this is a fake thing that's going to happen. It's not real. It's not a real war. It's not a real monster. Whatever he does is not real. And that's what he wouldn't shut up about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I blanked for a second.
There you go.
I think we do Ozymandias, Dr. Manhattan, and Rorschach.
I love it. Okay, Ozymandias.
Yes. Ozzy Osbourne.
Okay, so Ozzy Osbourne, not Ozymandias. Different people.
Okay.
Believe it or not, you heard
agree
it here first.
Agree to disagree.
Okay, so
and I'll tell you why.
He's the smartest man in the world. Mm-hmm. He's dummy rich. He is stupid rich, and he's got a plan. And the plan goes something like, "Hey, right now, our country thinks other countries are a threat, and other countries think other countries are a threat, and we're all preparing to knock each other out if we have to. It's escalating quickly." And he goes, "Well, here's the solution. We create a common enemy." So he gets a interdimensional being, space being, interdimensional monster, and his plan is to drop it in New York City, kill millions of people, and then let it do its thing, and then convince the world that, hey, these things will attack again. That was one picture. Picture what 100 will look like. Picture what 1,000 will look like. So that's his big plan. And the comic, it all leads up to Rorschach and the gang discovering that, it's Ozymandias behind the curtain, and they confront him. And that's when he does his dialogue. He reveals everything and his motives and plans. But he is very, hey, the ends justify the means. We can do this. We can make this bad thing happen because good will come from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very fun character.
Mm-hmm. And
I think the most one-dimensional character of every character, though.
that you're very right, because they don't follow him very much throughout the story. You see him a little bit in some of the quick clips, because like they paint him as the guy who's sold out. Like he's releasing action figures of the superheroes. He's the one doing like press conferences and stuff, and like he's the face of herodom right now.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't like him as a person, and it's more just like there's something about that. I have the brains and power, so that gives me the right.
Yep.
It's very annoying because he has like. I mean, it's funny because he did pull off all of that stuff. He did it, but he's got such delusions of grandeur. Like, I am, what's his name? The guy, like, Marcus Aurelius is coming to mind, but that's not who it is. It's one of the Greek heroes. He keeps saying and referencing that he wants to be like that guy.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
He compares himself to Greek gods. He says he is. Like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah. So does all this stuff, ends up killing the scientists and things, the people that have pulled this off with him, and like he ties up all the loose ends apparently, and then it's funny because he does try to kill Dr. Manhattan, because Dr. Manhattan's trying to stop him, but oddly enough just lets those heroes live because he knows that they'll be quiet about it too. I don't know. I'm just sorting through him because he ties up all the loose ends except for the hero gang.
Yeah, which so wait, does he kill? He doesn't kill Dr. Manhattan, does he?
He tries to. So when Dr. Manhattan's kind of coming after him, he eviscerates him, but Dr. Manhattan's like, putting myself back together is the first thing I learned.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Okay. Yeah. But Dr. Manhattan, he monologues to Dr. Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Manhattan is basically like converted.
Mm-hmm. No,
he's basically like, it's too late. Yeah.
I need to get into Manhattan too, because it's funny because he is super one-dimensional, but everything around him and who he is like mind-blowing, intricate, and like funny. But yeah, okay. Ozymandias, kind of full of himself, a little bit, just a little bit.
Yes.
Very. Yes. He's the one that's been pulling the strings behind the curtain. He's the one who's been like offing some superheroes that are getting close to the truth, getting people out of the way so that he can pull this off. He pulls strings to get oh my word, my stomach growled. To get like Manhattan out of the way. And so it's interesting because it just brings all those questions of like, do the ends justify the means, and who is truly good and who isn't, and yeah.
So one thought I've had about this is I think it would have been more compelling if instead of Ozymandias being like, oh, war is impending and nukes are gonna fly and everyone's gonna die, so we have to do this thing, if instead it went, a war is already happening, it's escalating to X point, and we have to do this, or we know something, so we have to do this. I just feel like it would have been more compelling if the flip of the coin, like the alternative to whatever he was going to do, had already progressed along somewhat. But I understand it also wouldn't have had the same, like, he is clearly ends justify the means.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this has not happened. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I think it would have been a more for me to look at him and be like, maybe he's got a point. I think I would have had to see them progress along very differently. But I like the choice they had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take, and I think you're right, because I think that would have been a more interesting question then. But I was thinking through, like, I was born in 1991, so literally at the end of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to have someone's take of, like, what it felt like to be in that time, because people felt like it was on the cusp.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I agree, because it still feels like he's scared of, like, what the future is, and he's so sure this is going to happen if people aren't going to, like, change this thing. And especially, like, coming at it from our perspective where it didn't happen, it's harder to say, like, this was justified.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed.
And Osmandius, the guy with the cat tiger biger,
Yes.
who he kills for no reason.
Yep. What a nerd.
Yep.
I can't help reading it now and being like, he's Elon Musk in 10 years.
I could see it.
He's a smart... Elon Musk is too dumb for that. He's a smart Elon Musk in 10 years.
I did find it ironic. He holds himself that highly, but so, like, after it all happens, he goes, like, happily up, and he's like, I'm gonna go meditate for a while. You guys do your thing. And Manhattan comes and follows him, and he's, like, meditating and thinking through everything, and then he's like, but Manhattan, did I do the right thing? Because he's, like, the only guy that he respects.
Yep.
And Manhattan's like, you never know. Or, like, he puts it like, you're never done. It's like you're never finished or something like that. Yeah. It's just funny.
Yeah.
But
it is.
All right.
Okay, who we got next?
The Manhattan.
The Manhattan.
So, this guy is pretty interesting because he's the only actual superhero. Yep. And you find out he was a nuclear scientist, or at least a scientist working on high-tech stuff.
Yeah.
He's
a scientist.
Gets fried by something. And it takes him, like, a few years, but he, like, atom by atom puts himself back together with a new look. He's blue.
Mm-hmm. Blue and naked.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, pretty interesting. But you walk through some of his life, because as you steadily get to know him more, he's becoming more detached from humanity, and you figure out why is because, on the one hand, he somehow can, like, visually see things down to an atomic level, and also have, like, the big picture of planets, stars. He can travel anywhere. He doesn't need to breathe, or he can make his own. He can just make anything, right?
Yep.
And you kind of find out that he's somehow living time all at once, right? Basically.
Yeah. Yep.
So you kind of watch his cycle where he's living, going through his first relationship and it turning sour, and going through his next relationship, as well as all of the things in the future and things happening, but also sort of clouded on some of what's happening. Like, doesn't have the complete picture in that moment. So he's like, I don't know, someone living outside of time, and that makes him just a really interesting character on its own.
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny because he feels like he's just on rails through the whole time of it, and he kind of is based on being manipulated by Ozymandias and stuff, because Ozymandias, like the guy's already detached. He pushes him over the edge by saying like people that have been around him have gotten cancer. He tricks him into thinking that the only connections he's had to the world, he's been poisoning himself. So he leaves, goes to Mars, makes a random city tower. And it's interesting because he goes where he feels like he has to be going. Like, he goes back to Earth to get her because he said, we have a conversation on Mars in like 5 minutes that changes something. It convinces me to be a better guy. And he can't just internalize that and be like, oh, I already know that, so I could be the good omniscient guy now. He's like, no, I'm just gonna kind of be a turd because I don't get how to process any of this. Because he basically makes Lori go through that whole realization of her mom and the comedian, like the comedian being her dad, going through all of that, and he's like, oh, can't you see that the turmoil and things you've gone through, and like how the person that I love came out of all this weirdness? You've made humanity interesting to me again. I'm now willing to take part. What?
Yeah.
But I don't know. He's really cool, really interesting.
Yep.
What do you think?
He's a jerk. Really interesting, fun character.
There's a scene really early where he's with Lori, and he knows that she's getting bored or whatever, so they're trying to be intimate, and he's like, he makes two of himself while one of himself is still working on like science stuff in another room, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought this might be exciting to you.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know.
Yeah. So I think, okay, it's funny because he's like the outside, like he's supposed to be so everything, so powerful, so smart, so whatever. And then you watch as other characters stick to their guns and other characters have a driving motivation, and he's just like, woo, I don't know what's going on with his motivations. Like you mentioned, he starts, he's a scientist, he's like, I'm going to help humanity. Bang, thing happens, he's completely changed, yada yada. He's like kind of there still, and then he's like, no, humans are stupid, this is dumb, I don't fit with them, bye. Goes to Mars by himself, siloed, whatever. And then he's like, oh, actually, you talk to me, yada yada, I think you're interesting, maybe I'll help humanity. Comes back, oh, I'm going to help humanity. Wait, we don't want to do it in the way that Ozymandias is doing it, but do we? Maybe? Question mark. Everything's revealed, yada yada, and he finds out, and we're going to talk about Rorschach in a second. Rorschach is basically like, I will tell the entire world. Everyone will know about this. Everyone will know this is fake. And the thing that you set up to cause world peace is not real. Even if that means we go back to where we were, everyone will know. And he goes, well, that's not the answer. Bang. Right? And we'll get into that. So he has this weird, this is what I am. This is what I am. Now I'm over here. Now I'm over here. It's not a consistent like flow of thought. And you'd think of everyone. The person that's living in the past, present, and the future, the person that can do all these things, that he would be the person that's removed from being human anymore. You would think he's the one that stays more consistent. And I don't think he does. I think he's more inconsistent and and volatile
Mm-hmm.
than other people. And it stands out when you're looking at Ozymandias and Rorschach, who are so committed to what they believe. They might have doubts or questions, but they make a decision and they're like, that's what I've worked toward, that's what it is. Ozymandias in the sense of, we're doing this horrible thing, it's going to happen, and then we will create world peace. And Rorschach in the sense of, no, we will do
stick to your principles and justice. And
yeah. Which is ironic because some of the things he does are not cool. Mm-hmm. They are creepy. Woof. But he has these justifications behind them. He is more like, it's the utility of what this action is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
very complicated character. Dr. Manhattan is interesting, complicated character. I think some of the imagery they have around him is part of what makes Watchmen so fresh, because he looked new. Mm-hmm. That is a bizarre, even now, if a comic came out now with a 7-foot tall blue man with his schlong hanging out,
mm-hmm.
that's super different, very weird. And they just leaned into it. They gave him so much time to flesh out his thoughts and what he was doing. Yeah.
And interesting, like you were saying, how he kind of flip-flops like that. And because even in his relationships and stuff, he's almost, I don't know, like he's almost determinist in some ways, because
mm-hmm.
he doesn't like dislike the first lady he's with. It's just things start to go sour, and he sees that in the future he's with this other girl, so he just starts making those decisions. It's just, he is, I don't know, like you said, he's interesting that he has almost the omnipotence, but almost never makes a choice until that very end thing.
Yep. Yeah.
He's just a passive observer at what his life is doing, and the only thing he pours himself into is his work, really.
And until that end thing, which I'm sure we'll mention in 2 seconds, he doesn't really make decisions.
Mm-mm.
Except for, like you're saying, it's almost like he goes, well, I know this happens. I don't know why, but I know it happens, so I'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So there's never a why.
Mm-mm.
It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because he goes, I know it's supposed to happen, or it does happen, so now I'll decide it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Which, okay, let me just highlight here also. Comic books. It is such an incredible thing in this genre to do something that, or in this medium, of comic books, to do something that is so genre mashing. We have romance, we have horror, we have crime, we have mystery, we have comedy, we have a pirate story, we have an investigative, like, FBI story. Like, there's so many things that they tried to do in this. And I mentioned that with Dr. Manhattan, because the entire comic book is like, until the last 15 pages, it is anchored to a reality that we are familiar with. It's like, the superheroes don't have powers, yada yada. The world we're in is an alternative history to now. We know what happened not long before the comic, when things started to divert. We know this world is one that we could live in with the same lives we had, right? Except for Dr. Manhattan, where it's like, actually, this is sci-fi. And it's just like, oh, by the way, he is all sci-fi. This is a science fiction character in a grounded story, which is crazy that they could do that.
Yep.
And then Rorschach, you've got this thriller, you know?
It's great. And then his ending's funny because he gives that little thing to Ozymandias, but he's like, I'm gonna go to another galaxy that's a little less complicated. I may make my own life, you know.
Yeah.
Just the offhand, I'm a god type of thing. I don't know. It was funny, but very interesting, and yeah, the duality of simplicity but hyper complicated.
Yep.
And now I think the most
Is
interesting.
it Rorschach time?
Yeah, the most interesting and most
Let's
fun.
do it.
Rorschach. And
Was he your favorite character?
yes.
Good.
Yes. Cuz he's very interesting. Like you see him in the beginning where he's the vigilante private eye solving crime on his own. Everyone else has given up, and he's like inner monologuing to himself in his journals.
Yeah.
Very interesting. He wears an ink blot as a face, and it's cool because you gradually get to see more and more about him, where you see like, oh, he's posing as a homeless guy when he's not, you know, Rorschaching. But you start to be like, realize, oh, is he though? Is he homeless and crazy? And but he knows that about himself, that he knows that he's not selling out for the money. He's not living the life he could have because he sees the other people that are doing fine, because he's still committed to this justice and stuff like that. So they toe a line where he is, because eventually he gets captured. Man, there's too much to talk about. He's all about the justice, and that his morals are the right ones, or at least he's gonna keep going with it. So like he goes.
Yep. He's a very, like, as far as his morals, he's a very, like, there is right, there is wrong. And he's convinced that if he is seeking what's right, he'll know it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like the sniff test for him.
Yeah.
And that's like his entire personality that they paint is, I know what's right and I know what stinks.
Yep.
And I'm going to avoid what stinks and go toward what's right.
Yep. And willing to track down clues and stuff. He'll go break people's arms, beat them up, cut a finger off or two if he views you as a bad enough person that he needs to get information out of. But all his own litmus test, his own Rorschach. What does he see in the world? But you get even a deeper picture because he gets captured, framed for a murder of an old villain, framed by Ozymandias. And you get to peer into him through the lens of a psychiatrist that comes to see him. And at first, it's Rorschach's playing the game. I see this normal thing because they actually do ink blots, which is funny and ironic.
Love it.
But they show reference that when he sees what he actually sees in these pictures is like, oh, he sees a dog's head split open. He sees his mom and a guy doing it because his mom was a prostitute. And just all these other things that you're like, oh, his life has been horrible, and he might actually be crazy. Mm-hmm. But gradually the psychiatrist gets him to open up, and it blows the psychiatrist's mind because he's like, wait, this guy is clearly like demented in some ways, but maybe he's right. Maybe his way of going about like what's right and wrong and stuff is correct or something. But yeah, and just our view into this as like the guy that's doggedly trying to track down what's happening. But just so interesting that because he's kind of split personality, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you would even call that.
Yeah,
It's so. Yeah, he's. I don't know.
he definitely views Rorschach as something else. Like,
Yeah, it's like a persona or like. But
yeah,
I feel like they imply that he almost has control over like when he's who he is, which I don't. So half of me is like, I don't know if they're trying to say it's like an act or like he's doing it only for himself, or if he has like multiple personalities and Rorschach is like one of them. I have no idea.
I don't know either. I know
Yeah.
he screams like "Don't take my face away" when he takes the when they take the mask off of him. And the way he talks, he kind of views at least that as when he's got the mask on, he's at this level of what he's doing, good, bad, right, wrong. And
Yep.
I don't remember if does he do bad things when he has the mask off?
He does bad things to bad people.
So his landlord accused him of like sexual assault or something,
Yep.
and he said that she lied, but I don't know if we know if when he had his mask off he was still like I don't know if he was doing bad things but like views that as a sectioned off part of his life is what I'm thinking.
But I do think so Rorschach, the
Yes.
dog.
The dog.
What a crazy part of the story.
Oh yeah.
So Rorschach finds this guy, horrible guy, right? Sexually assaulting, raping kid, killing them. And Rorschach he's like, this dude he didn't get justice, right? The court system wasn't enough, and that's part of his thing. Is like people go to jail and they get back out and they do the same thing again. So he's like, that's not good. That doesn't meet his test of good, right, wrong. So he's like, cool, I'll do the right thing. I'll do the thing that the court couldn't do, that nobody else could do. And he breaks into this dude's house, and the first thing he does is brutally murder this guy's dog. So that when the guy comes back to his house, he sees his dog dead, like graphically killed. And it's like this, even while you're alive, even before Rorschach can do the thing that he came here to do, which is kill this guy. He's like, even killing him wasn't enough of a punishment. I'm going to make him suffer for the last few seconds he has.
Yep.
So dark. But I think, to me, that is the definitive story of Rorschach. One thing I'm not a huge fan of with these comics, and especially with the before Watchmen comics, which, like I said, were not written by Alan Moore, they were written by other people, but something I think those comics do that I really dislike and I think is very problematic is it tells a story and goes, look, we can explain that because trauma, decisions. And they basically go, if you have childhood trauma, then you'll make weird decisions. And I think that's super problematic and weird. I don't have an entire objection to it with Rorschach. The childhood trauma they portray in the comics is an interesting story beat to him. But I don't like that, because I've read reviews, I've read what other people have said about Watchmen. There are a lot of people that go, "Oh, look, it's childhood." It's like, no, that's not the point. The point is his gauge of right wrong goes, this guy is so in the wrong that I will do something, not just kill him evil. I will kill his dog. I will break into his house. If somebody shows up, they're probably gonna die because they're a witness. Like, I will kill this guy because he does not deserve to live, and in fact he deserves to suffer, even if it means I'm killing a dog while he's here. He just doesn't value the dog. But then, the final conclusion of this decision might save the world. this decision might bring world peace. I'm getting back in focus. This decision might make world peace. Rorschach can't co-sign, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's the person. If the person is bad, if the person has wronged him, that's his, okay, actions being taken. But if the person is wholesome, if the person's innocent, if the person's good, yeah. But he sticks by it. He's so rigid in his, once I've decided this is right, it's right. Once I've decided it's the thing to do, it's the thing to do.
I also like agree that I think it's problematic to throw it just at the childhood stuff, because he went through like a really rough childhood, but he became a superhero or whatever, and like was fighting crime and probably rough around the edges, but it wasn't till he met what you could probably call as one of the most evil of all evil things to put him over that edge. And yeah, but like such an interesting character. Yeah.
And his character is like the ending that we get, which I love, is only because of his character. They use his character as a catalyst to give us this like grand question and this open-ended story. But the part of the conclusion, Ozymandias is like, hey, here's the deal, here's what's happening. We're dropping this creature. New York's gonna be destroyed. Millions of people are gonna die. It's too late. Get wrecked, nerds. And Rorschach is like, I will tell everyone what you did. Everyone. And they're basically like, wait, but if it's already happened, if it's already too late, it's already in motion, why? Right? At least we'll have world peace, even if the bad thing did happen. And the thing that he goes, this is right. This is my right. He goes, but you still did something that was so evil. You are the person that did it. People need to know. People deserve to know. So I will tell them, even if it means not
ruining all
world
this.
peace. Even if it means millions of more people will die. That's crazy. That is such a fun. And then, so basically what happens then is Dr. Manhattan goes, no, we can't let that happen. And he explodes Rorschach in the snow. It is beautiful. Dave saw it in black and white. It is a dark red splattered across on the illustration, and of course it looks like a Rorschach test. It's such a good conclusion to the guy that he would go down swinging, just streaming tears, saying he's going to tell the world he is so committed to what he believes in a similar way to, even though Ozymandias had questions, even though Ozymandias also was willing to make really, really hard decisions that would hurt people, in the same way that Rorschach is willing to make really, really hard decisions that would hurt people. Such a cool dynamic. And that Dr. Manhattan is the person that killed him is like the craziest flip to me of like, that's not the guy I thought would do that.
No, yeah. And why did Ozymandias let him go is interesting. But yeah, and then at the very end we see that he sent his entire journal of what happened to like a newspaper, and they're like reaching for it right at the end, so you don't know what's gonna happen. Is there world peace, or is it gonna like get thrown out the window? Or yeah. It leaves
I sure would hate if
questions.
they continued the story on in a TV show or a follow-up series called Doomsday Clock, where, because it's, why? That's the thing. It is the, like, one of my favorite open-ended stories that goes, you as the reader get to decide or not. You can be like, the story ends there, my mind goes no further, I'm done. That is a full story, I'm done. Or you can think about, because they painted such a cool world that was close enough to our world to go, I think I can make inferences based on what I know about this world, but I know enough about the fictional world, and this is what's so crazy good. I know enough about the fictional world of Watchmen to go, I think I can parse out what would happen if it's released, and I think I can parse out what would happen if it's not. That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's so fun. But that's so the story, right? The narration that we've learned through a lot of the story, we learned that's, this is a part of the writing. That's what the writing is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's why I leave this to you. It's this great handoff of what's going to happen next. The story's out there if it should be. If it can be. Mm-hmm. If this journalist is going to publish it. Yeah.
It was cool. As much as at times the whole story was off-putting because it's intense, masterful from the start to the end.
Yep.
And such an interesting, I don't know, so many questions raised, like you said. Did they actually come out with an after series? And okay, I don't want to know.
They did.
Don't tell me. No.
I won't tell you the plots, but they did a story called Doomsday Clock, which I read the first 3 issues of and hated. So here's all you need to know you won't. It's not a good fit to follow up Watchmen. It's a superhero crossover.
Like other superheroes come into the story?
Like Superman and Batman.
Yeah, no.
And then there's a TV show. TV show, HBO. I think 2 seasons now. I have not watched any of the TV show. Mainly, honestly, the reason I didn't watch the TV show is because I read part of a review and I learned that the character that is Silk Scepter,
mm-hmm.
she in this show changes her name to be the last name of the comedian. And I was like, I don't feel like the character I knew in Watchmen
mm-hmm.
would do that.
I don't either.
I could be wrong, but I feel like that's not a legacy. Even with her mom being like, it's complicated, she knew very clearly in the comic, she knew of what the comedian had tried to do, not only to her mom, but to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so far removed from something that I think that character would want in her, like, living legacy,
Because, so there's story things that could be like if she showed things of like people who don't have fathers or parents, there's tendencies to get attached to the idea of things like that. So like there's story beats that could make something like that make some sense. But like you said, she didn't really show any of that in the story we saw. She didn't really rebel against her mom, and other than her mom kind of being a nag and her questioning like, did I do my whole life just because of what my mom pushed me to do? She didn't hate her mom, and she liked her mom.
Yeah.
And hated the comedian knowing what he did, and went through that kind of traumatic realization of who he was and how things are complicated, but I don't think ever like forgave him or wanted to be associated with him.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do agree. So that's, I mean, the character that I met in Watchmen is a character that's like constantly in conflict with, why am I here? What am I doing? Am I doing it for me? Am I doing it for others? Mm-hmm. And then to have that character make a decision that goes, I'm changing my name to someone else's name, to a legacy that isn't something that is one of the only pillars of that character, is that she has detested that.
Yeah.
And I understand it's complicated with that being your dad, but I feel like that's not what that character would have done. So I was like, okay, I literally, I know pretty much nothing about the plot, but I was like, I learned that, and I was like, I think that's all I need to know the characters that I feel like I know and I enjoy when I read Watchmen. I don't want to revisit them anymore. I did that with Before Watchmen for some of them, and I didn't enjoy experiencing that, and I didn't enjoy the few episodes I read of Doomsday Clock, so I was like, I'm going to cap it. I'm done. I have the characters in Watchmen. I can revisit that as much as I want.
I think that's fair.
Okay, so the wine bottle, the perfume bottle.
Perfume bottle.
Yeah, do you remember Silk Scepter? She drops the perfume bottle when she learns about the comedian, that whole thing, and it like spirals to the ground.
I remember
crashes.
That, and then doesn't she dump? She drops a snow globe too.
It's a snow globe.
Oh, okay,
Yeah. I'm thinking the perfume bottle is on the cover of one of those comics.
Gotcha.
Yes, but she drops the snow globe and it breaks. Yeah. Okay. So snow globe, which first of all, Watchmen. How cool! You didn't probably see the covers because you read it.
I think I did.
You read an entire. Okay, the covers don't depict action. They depict set pieces almost. Like it's so crazy. It's so good.
Oh yes, I saw these.
Yeah. Okay.
Like the picture in the sand on Mars, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, out of
Those are
pictures
wonderful.
in the sand on Mars, what would you give Watchmen?
Ooh.
I think I may have overhyped it, but I stand by what I said.
It's hard. It's a really hard one to put down, because a really hard number to give, I guess, to say, because like I've said in the past, like things that are hard and like make me not squeamish, but like I get affected a lot by the things I read or watch, and if they're dark and gritty and stuff like that, it takes me to a hard place sometimes. And it's like I enjoyed a lot of this, but there's like parts of it that I didn't enjoy because it was that way. But it's like it's worth doing, because you, especially when you come out and process something like this and actually talk about it, it's so much cooler. Because like if I just read it on my own, I'd probably give like a 5 or 6 because it's cool. But I think talking it out, seeing how talking it out, and also seeing like the story the whole way through, and like looking back through it, it's like, yeah, I do think I want to read this again. I enjoyed it, and all of the thoughts, questions, characters, and things you see, that I'd probably give it like an 8 or 9 now. And I think it can be a very fun read at times, and a very interesting one, but not easy. So
I can agree with that.
I think sad pictures in the sand of Mars is a good thought. Either that or blood-stained smiley face buttons.
Oh, yeah, I should have gone with
No,
that.
no.
No, you're right, though. Okay, so what are you giving it officially?
9. I'll give it a 9.
Okay. Well, good news. I'm also giving it a 9 pictures in the sand on Mars out of 10 pictures in the sand on Mars. I think it is one of the pinnacle pieces of comic book storytelling. I think they did things that are still continue to be a massive influence on comics today. I 2 weeks ago I revisited Sandman Overture, which is it's a very fun comic. Man, the color work in Sandman Overture is so clearly, at least in my opinion, it is like, whether they intended it or not, there are so many draws to Watchmen there. I just can't get over the impact that Watchmen has had in writing, in art, in style, in color, in themes that happen now in comics. I think Watchmen really paved the way. I think it was willing to take a look at comic books and superhero tropes in a way that opened the door for other people to approach tropes and superheroes in a way that is not always friendly.
It came out of nowhere, right?
Puts them up to the light. Yeah, it was pretty.
Which
Mellow in a lot of comic books at that point in time.
Blows my mind because you have something this close to perfect. I would say it's pretty close for what it's trying to do and everything else. Because that doesn't usually happen. Usually it's failed attempts first or mixed success.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Worth a read.
I love it a lot. One of my favorites. Definitely worth a read. Yeah. Next comic book though will be lighter.
Okay.
It will be more easygoing. I when I was on the planes over the holidays so much, I reread Saga. Did I mention I was reading Saga again in the last one?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
How about we?
Well,
so this has been a really long episode.
Oh, it has.
Let's say like thanks for watching. We're gonna like give it the old sign off, but we're gonna release something smaller, quick, just saying like what we've been reading, what we did over the holidays, something quick if we want to. Does that work?
I'd like that. Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Well,
okay, so that's Watchmen.
That's Watchmen. Worth it. Good.
I love it.
Lost for words. That's me. But yeah, thanks for watching Super Hero Shonen Punch. We'll be continuing to release stuff. I'll eventually get all this stuff edited and actually out. But yeah, let us know if there's things you want us to read, if you want us to watch something. I may make Josh watch an anime next, just to mix it up.
I would like that.
Oh, he would. He loves it. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
I'm your first puncher, Josh.
I'm your other puncher, Dave.
I punch with both hands, so I'm also the third puncher. Get out of here, nerds.
That's cheating. Goodbye.